The Only Road, Chapter 16. It didn't take long to get to the third bridge. Instead of waiting around doing nothing until the food van came, Xavi decided to try to find some work at the nearby mercado. His phone, the only thing he had owned, had been picked from his pocket on the train. I'm selling the charger, and it might be smart to get some food and water for the train as well. We can't count on people throwing us supplies again. Jaime remembered the hunger and thirst from his train ride. Working to pick up some extra supplies was a good idea. The money to pay Santos remained sewed in their jeans. Diaz's instructions to save it echoed in Jaime's mind. Hundreds of stalls crammed into a warehouse building that made up the mercado. With no straight aisles, the place was like a labyrinth of tables and displays. Fruits and vegetables of every color and degree of ripeness crowded tables. Handmade shirts waved next to a cobbler measuring an old man's foot. Pirated DVDs turned on wobbly stands. Most of the vendors in the mercado, however, didn't have enough money, let alone work, to spare. Others swore and told them to go back home. A man held his shoe up in the air as if he were going to hit them with it. Get lost, desgraciados, before I call La Migra to kick your scrawny butts. Rafa turned to tell the man off, but Xavi grabbed him by the shirt and they scurried away. As hard as it might be for La Migra to catch them with all the people milling about, there was no point in looking for trouble. They were a bit more cautious and polite when asking the next vendors for work. Benchico, one man with a gray ponytail, called out to Jaime. You can help us unload the fruit from the truck. Jaime agreed by lifting one of the boxes the man indicated, staggering under the weight. Still, it was a job, and this man was the nicest anyone at the mercado had been. 2 stalls away, Angela hacked away at pineapples to sell in chunks for a woman who looked about 100 years old. Around the corner, Joaquin scrubbed clean the cages holding live chickens. The other 2 had disappeared with Vida into the crowded marketplace, still looking for work. The merchants seemed more willing to trust girls and younger boys than teenagers. After an hour carrying heavy boxes, the gray ponytail man gave Jaime 2 overripe squashed papayas and a pat on the back. Better than nothing, he supposed. On the table at the other side of Angela, a woman with more gums than teeth sold turan made with almonds, sugar, and egg whites. Jaime spent 10 minutes haggling the price of a broken piece and a water bottle with the 12 pesos he'd earned on the bus. Xavi, Angela, and Joaquin didn't fare much better. As they got ready to leave the mercado, an hour before sunset, they collectively had 4 cracked raw eggs, some broken tortillas, a slab of lard, and a handful of overripe fruit, all of which they put in Angela's backpack. Vida had dodged kick threats but made out with a pretty full belly. Jaime didn't want to know what she'd found along the market floor, but at least she seemed happy. They waited for Rafa at a busy street corner near one of the entrances to the mercado, where the smell of pork rotating on a spit had their mouths watering. Every year for my birthday, Jaime said with eyes closed to savor the moment, Mama makes the best pineapple pork. Last year's was amazing, Angela agreed. Tia Lourdes brought up the pig and Miguel gave up after 2 weeks of trying to become a vegetarian. It was around that time Mama tried to show me how to make her flan de coco, the best dessert on earth. I still can't make it like she does. Oh, what Jaime wouldn't give for some coconut custard right now. I can't tell the difference. Angela nudged him with a smile before turning to Joaquin. What about you, Papi? What food do you miss? Black beans with tostones, he said, referring to fried green plantains that Jaime liked as well. But I'll never eat them again. Of course you will. We're all going to make it, you'll see. Angela wrapped Joaquin in a hug and didn't see the young boy's dark eyes moistening. He said so little of his life, but Jaime wondered if maybe someone close to him used to make the beans and tostones someone who might have died or been killed. Well, my abuela, Zavi said to lighten the mood, makes the best pupusas. You know what they are? Joaquin nodded, but both Angela and Jaime shook their heads. Fried corn masa stuffed with meat, beans, and oozing with cheese. Jaime waved his arms in the air. Okay, stop. You have even Vida drooling. The mutt yipped at the sound of her name, and sure enough, a wet drop marked the pavement below her open mouth. They had agreed to wait for Rafa before breaking into any of the food they'd been giving, but if that boy didn't show up soon, they might as well forget about him. A yell came from the market, and they all turned to see none other than Rafa zooming toward them. Go, go, ándale, he screamed. Jaime grabbed Angela's hand, and they took off with Save and Joaquin at their sides, Vida at their feet. Grab him! An old man shouted after them. People stopped their shopping to look around, but Jaime couldn't hear anybody chasing them. After a few blocks, he glanced over his shoulder. There was no one there. Hands on their knees, they caught their breath as they looked around. No one came after them. Well, that was fun. Rafa grinned while readjusting his ball cap. The others stared back at him, not grinning. What happened? Zavi asked took a deep breath as if he didn't want to know the answer. Rafa shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. Old geezer didn't want to pay me after all the work I did, so I took these. He held out 2 packs of cigarettes. Jaime and Joaquin jumped to Angela's side as Zavi grabbed Rafa by the shirt and looked like he was about to beat him up. You almost got us caught for a couple stupid packs of cigarettes? Y chicle. Rafa showed them the fruity bubble gum he'd also stolen. Want some? Idiota. Zavi let go of him and threw his arms in the air as he paced back and forth. This is exactly why Mexicans hate us here for stupid acts like that. He was trying to stiff me after I cleaned his display, Rafa insisted. But Zavi wasn't listening. I have not come all this way to get arrested over cigarettes. Zavi marched back to Rafa and pointed a finger in his face. If you ever pull something like that again, you're going to wish you were back in Honduras. Fine, man, I'm sorry. For a moment, Rafa looked scared, but then he smiled and waved his hand again. Here, have some gum anyway. Zavi swore, paced a bit more, and then sighed as he took a piece. Rafa then offered some to everyone else. Jaime didn't chew gum often and didn't realize how much he missed it. Sweet and fruity, it was like a fiesta in his mouth. He and Joaquin competed to see who could blow bigger bubbles. He didn't like that Rafa had stolen it, but since he had, there was no reason not to enjoy it. I didn't know you smoked, Jaime said, as he tried to retract the bubble that had burst over his chin. They walked slowly back to the bridge where they hoped the legless man was right about the food truck. Rafa blew his own bubble and slipped it back in his mouth so it popped inside. I do sometimes, but that's not why I took them. They'll be good for bartering. For some people, cigarettes are more important than food. Jaime didn't know what to say. For once, Rafa seemed to have a very practical idea. There were about 40 people huddled under the third bridge in small groups when they got back. Old, young, in between. Some were missing teeth or limbs. Some had gashes so deep or bleeding so bad, Jaime wondered if there was a doctor they could go see. One man had all his clothes stolen hours before and sat naked, asking everyone who came if they had a spare pair of pants. It was like being surrounded by the homeless, which Jaime supposed they all were. From the sound of their accents, there were a few southern Mexicans, but most were Central American from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. At least half of them had given up hope on ever getting to El Norte and had resolved to stay in Ciudad, Mexico, or return home. The promised land, they decided, was a dream for other fools. The food wagon was run by a local charity. It fed them mushy, chicken-flavored rice with some beans mixed in, which was better than the legless man suggested, and powdered lemonade. After a few days of barely eating anything, Jaime liked the feeling of finally having a full stomach. The 5 of them were tucked away where the underside of the bridge met the concrete hill at the top of the bridge. Dirt had been hollowed out, giving them more cave than exposure. A good thing because many of the others under the bridge were getting drunk on cheap liquor or high on glue. So far, they were leaving Jaime and his friends alone. Jaime hoped Rafa wouldn't provoke anyone with his big mouth. Light from a street lamp shone enough for Jaime to sketch out their little group. Joaquin fast asleep with his head on Angela's lap and his arm around Vida, who also had her head on Angela. Angela leaned against the concrete, her hand stroking Joaquin's hair. Rafa looking through a dirty magazine he found. Xavi lying down with his knees bent and his arms behind his head. Jaime could hear him as he told Angela about their experience on the train. We were lucky. The train kept stopping to load and unload cargo, or sometimes for security checkpoints. A lot of people would jump off when the train slowed down, not knowing what kind of danger was up ahead. Then after we passed the town or the checkpoint, new people would get on. But you didn't get off? Were people scared and jumping off for no reason? Angela asked. Xavi took a while to answer. Jaime put down his sketchbook to stare at the older boy. No, there was a reason, he said to the concrete road above his head. Gangs run the tracks. Micra officers sometimes work with them. It was dark and we were either still in Chiapas or just into Oaxaca when 20 gang members got on board. They demanded money and threatened anyone who didn't pay. One boy about Jaime's age insulted them. They caught him, threw him off the train, and shot him in the air like a pigeon. I don't even think they killed him. I imagine him lying helpless on the tracks, bleeding to death. Angela removed the hand that had been petting Joaquin's hair to place it on Xavi's shoulder. You couldn't have done anything for him. I know, but he wasn't the only one. Another boy tried to get on board, slipped, and was gobbled up by the train in an instant. Didn't even derail the car. Xavi turned away from the underside of the bridge to roll over on his side, one hand holding up his head as the other took Angela's hand. I'm glad you were there. The gang was horrible to one girl. We kept hearing her screams. If we had tried to help her, they would have done the same to us. Joaquin didn't stop shaking for hours afterward. I don't think he slept in days. The young boy didn't even shift at the sound of his name. His breathing remained deep and steady as if he were on a feather mattress in a grand hotel instead of under a concrete bridge with a leg for a pillow. How did you 3 avoid the gangs? Jaime asked softly, not sure if he wanted to know. He couldn't think of any explanation that didn't involve bribery or agreeing to join the gang themselves. Again, Xavi took a few seconds to respond as if he wasn't sure he wanted to relive what happened. I helped out Cesar. Remember him from the football games? He tripped trying to board the train, but somehow I caught him and got him to safety. He'd been on the train 6 times already, but kept getting deported back to the Guatemalan border once he got farther north. One of those times he must have gotten friendly with the train gang. I didn't notice until we were riding with him that he had their tattoo of a bleeding heart on the underside of his wrist. The gang left him alone, and because we were next to him, they left us alone too. With La Migra, he pointed out where immigrants were hiding and gave them other information in exchange for our safety. I almost wish we had jumped off at each stop along with the rest of the people. Angela lifted Xavi's hand and shook it to show him she wasn't letting go. But then we wouldn't have seen you again. Xavi tried to smile, but then shook his head, no. He didn't release Angela's hand either. Back home, I never would have associated with a bottom feeder like that. Here, I hate feeling so helpless, like I have no choice. Is it worth going against your morals just to stay alive? I don't know. While Angela consoled Zave, Jaime opened up his sketchbook and glanced through the pages. There were drawings of Miguel's funeral and the people on the bus, of Angela and Zave dancing in front of the bonfire, and the blind sketches he'd done in the dark train car, slightly distorted and creepy with elongated skulls and askew mouths, half on the face, half floating in the air beside the person. He went back to the beginning and found the drawings of his family. Papa, Mama, Abuela, Miguel, Tíos Daniel, and Rosario, Rosita with her baby, Kiko who missed them. Maybe he should have let the Alphas recruit him just to see his family every day. But then they would have made him someone he wasn't. And what would have happened if the Alphas had made him hurt someone he loved, Angela or another cousin? He wouldn't have been able to do it. Like Zavi, he could only hope that this whole journey would be worth it. He owed his family that much. Whether it was the low growl from Vida or the click of a gun being cocked, the five woke up with a start from their puppy pile sleeping arrangement. Dawn wasn't too far off, and the street light that shone into their bridge cave was still on. Jaime didn't need to blink for his eyes to register a teen with a shaved head holding a pistol at them. Good morning, he grinned as if he were holding up a cup of cafe instead of a pistol. He glared at them with red eyes that didn't seem to focus. Which of you wants to do us a favor? No one said anything. Jaime held his breath, unable to move. It was like he was a clay model, waiting for a sculptor to mold him into shape. Even Miguel wouldn't know what to do. The bald teen laughed and pointed the gun directly at Joaquin's head. What about you, little boy? Don't you want to reach El Norte? We'll help you if you help us. Joaquin cowered but kept his wide eyes on the gun. Everyone did. The word help stabbed Jaime like a bad memory. What kind of favor are we talking about? Rafa said slowly. The gun shifted to him in an instant. Jaime cringed. Couldn't Rafa, for once, just keep his mouth shut? Ah, a volunteer, the guy said with a cackle like an evil witch. Rafa paled slightly but pretended to keep his cool. No, just want more information. The pistol waved up and down in Rafa's direction as if to remind him of what it could do. Information is costly. Yeah, but if you kill me, who's going to do you a favor? Rafa crossed his arms over his chest. Santa Maria, Madre de Dios. The prayer ran through Jaime's head. He wished he had the courage to cross himself before Rafa got them all killed. Either the thug thought Rafa had made a valid point, or he figured by holding the gun he had nothing to lose, but he went ahead and answered the question. We have something we want you to carry over the border. You do that, and we get you across. Rafa stroked the few hairs he had growing out of his chin as if he were mocking the gangster by pondering the proposal. Bueno, I can be your mule. Rafa, no! Angela exclaimed through closed mouth. The gun shifted to her. Jaime kept reciting Hail Mary in his head, even though he was sure his heart had stopped. Not Angela, please, not Angela. He hated to pick someone, but if he had to, better Rafa than any of the others. He was the one who had gotten them into this anyway. Or rather, he was the one who had volunteered to get them out of it. It'll be fun, Rafa said as he stood up. But behind his forced overconfidence, Jaime saw a scared boy who had left home because his mama preferred to get drunk rather than feed her children. Yeah, fun, the thug smirked. He grabbed Rafa's arm with one hand while still pointing the gun with the other. Anyone else want to have some fun? They said nothing, and he shrugged. He pulled Rafa down the bridge, where they were met with another armed boy who had recruited a few other volunteers. Jaime sent another prayer, this one to San Francisco and Miguel. Please take care of this crazy boy. Send me a message on Facebook when you get there. Rafa waved his ball cap with one last attempt of his carefree tone. No one answered aloud, but said their goodbyes and well wishes through thoughts and prayers. Within seconds he was gone, and Jaime got the feeling they would never see or hear from him again. Instead, he left behind a great act of chivalry, 2 packs of cigarettes.